welcome you to yet another episode of our Uganda Diaspora Show here on Civic Space TV. And those of you joining us for the first time, my name is Lynn Kyomugisha. With me today is Okot, Ochen, we have Miriam Kyomugasho, and of course Francis Kamuhanda. And we are going to have a conversation on the recently concluded State of the Nation address here in Uganda. If you know State of the Nation address, you know that the next week we will be having the budget speech. And from the State of the Nation address, many people have been making comments to it and saying the president ought to address us really in regard to issues, the nation. But instead, he seems to be doing the usual, talking about history and patriotism and all those things. But he is the president, and I suppose he has every right to address us however he deems fit. But that is subject to debate. And so today we seek to discuss and analyze and maybe take a look at what might the budget speech entail from the State of the Nation address, or what should the president have addressed? The State of the Nation address tackled a number of issues, but for me, importantly, were the five tasks for the next financial year that the president mentioned before he, of course, opened the fourth session of the 11th Parliament. And among them, the first one he mentioned was that Ugandan wealth creators need to ensure that all adults engage in wealth creation in 4 sectors of commercial agriculture and the rest. The second task he did mention was that the Ugandan wealth creators struggle for the completely free trade in the common market of East Africa. And then the third he mentioned was that we have fully recovered from the adverse effects of COVID and other negative global phenomena, and we need to ensure that we provide completely free education for the Ugandan children in government primary, secondary, and tertiary institutions so that we achieve the target of Bona Basome, everybody, and that is education for all. Now, the fourth task was, he mentioned, is that for Ugandans and East Africans, they have the right spectacles to see how the black race can survive as a free people or even survive at all, to struggle and bring about the creation of the East African Federation. That was a very interesting one. We'll get to that. Now, the fifth was eliminate corruption in the public service and from among political leaders. Important to note, as we shall delve further, important to note is that the leader of opposition and his dissidents, as he called them, did boycott the State of the Nation address. That is Joel Sinyonyi and other opposition leaders. He says the decision to boycott has been widely criticized, with many arguing that they missed a crucial opportunity to engage with the government. Those are reactions from why the opposition missed out. But Joe, says that they cannot sit and continue to listen to the same stories day in, day out, and it has become ritualistic. He says the president regurgitates things of 1990 and so on. So I bring it to you, lady and gentlemen. I'll start with you, Francis Kamuhanda. I want to ask you, what do you make of the State of the Nation address? And please be as honest as you possibly can, because I know you represent a section of the opposition. But from all these things, can we be honest to each other and the nation, of course?
Thank you, Lee, and other fellow panelists. And it is always an exciting moment to be here and discuss what I would call matters of national importance to our country. But I generally look at the president's speeches in most cases as a part of passing time, not as taking him seriously yes, as how he used to be. As earlier on said, Museveni should now be in university teaching history because he doesn't have what to offer to this country. Now, I expected that in this address, number one, he's going to talk about the economy and how we have progressed in terms of unemployment that is being faced and how we have a flock of Ugandans moving out of the country to go and look for jobs, and then asking or telling us what he's doing to address that. Two, I expect him to talk healthy population in terms of service delivery, in terms of medical care, service delivery in terms of ensuring that there is no brain drain, especially our doctors, how are they rated in the country? If you look at, I expect him to talk about other health reports that have been coming out, like the one that we look here. The number of Ugandans have mental issues. Like, as a leader, what is bringing it, and how is he determined to address that? Then I also expected him to talk about democracy, how it is applied at home, not democracy in terms of the whole of Africa. Because you can't remove a log, a speck from your neighbor's eye before removing a log from your own eye. Because when he talks about democracy in Africa, how that is his vision, but is there democracy at home that other countries can bank on? And then we see that there is a multiplier effect to see that also other countries are learning from us. I expected him to hint about the human rights. Either he would bring it in a way that he's talking about human rights abuse in relation to the sanction. And I have said this, the sanction that were put on, or that are being put on the Speaker of Parliament and the ministers and the rulers who have grossly abused human rights, is equally sanctions on all of us as Ugandans indirectly. So I expected him to come and clarify that image to Ugandans, and then we know what's going on. But instead, he was busy dwelling on Idi Amin, and yet these people performed. During Idi Amin, there was no corruption. Now, I expected him to dwell much on the ulcer of corruption, which is the legacy anyway that he's a government to live. But was money from foreigners, and one has been arrested. But people have been getting money from even Ugandans to go and see Museveni. General Museveni is a commodity. I don't see him as a president. He's a commodity that his henchmen and so on have been trading. So I find all these lacking. And then when he comes and then gives the 5 tasks as how you have, I listened and was following. Wealth creation. And then he says he tasks people to go and ensure there is wealth creation. So does he even understand what wealth is? Does he even understand how all the stages through which it is created? He expects that by sending some few millions at the parish level, and he doesn't know how even at the parish level, the person who is distributing it to the people, they first remove their cut. And you assume that the person who is applying for that is getting 1 million, which is nothing anyway. But in actual sense, the person is signing for even maybe 600, but he's saying that has got 1 million. So all this level of corruption that has been entrenched, he needs to dwell much on those that are affecting a common person. Like Lynn, I have always said that for me, I don't deal with telling me about macroeconomics. Tell me about microeconomics. I have said I use my grandmother, I use my grandfather, I use my brother, I use my father in the village as a yardstick. When you tell me that conditions have improved up to this percent, I should see it down. Because you can't tell me a building is strong when the foundation is shaky or is weak. Yes, I can see that the economy, or Uganda's economy is growing because Museveni is increasing on the number of cars that he's having, including his son. From his perspective, I do agree with him because he's living a luxurious life and he's cut off completely from the population, from the common person. And yet he would be speaking to a common person. That's what I wanted to see in all these arguments. Now, when he says we are recovering since COVID, we are recovering and then we are growing steadily, I don't agree. He talked about the vaccines during COVID. You know how much money was sunk into the discovery of vaccines and so on. Which vaccine allocated again so much money to, I don't know, somebody who is investing in I don't know whether it is a pharmaceutical again in the vaccine. During the Musenero's time, they were given a lot of money that they are going to discover this. Why he would have come, he says, this is a sample, for example, of the vaccines that we have developed, and this is how we are going about it. So I always see that Museveni is a joker when it comes to the State of Nation address. And if there is anybody who prepares that for him, that script, for sure that person should be fired. But if he is the one who prepares it for himself, it really speaks volume that he completely has nothing to offer to this country because he completely doesn't understand what Uganda is and what Ugandans were going through. When he talks about the black race, I don't agree with him that Museveni is even thinking about the black race. Completely nothing. Because if you are thinking about the black race, you can't kill your own people and bodies are dying. You can't put your own people in prison just because they are expressing their opinion. Just because somebody is going to hold the rally to also mobilize and talk to people that can be the alternative government. And then you arrest them and then you say you wish good for the black people of the black race. First emancipate your own people and then it will have a ripple effect now to other neighbors and other countries looking at it. The common market, what is Uganda going to sell, for example, during the free trade market? What are we going to sell? What value have we added on what we are going to sell? See how they limit, they keep pushing to the wall a common person. Recently, what did he tell at Pololo, the traders, when they were saying, how can we best get a win-win situation? He told them he's about to die, so he doesn't care. So such a person, so he wants to die with all of us, he wants to die with our country. Let him go and die in peace than suffocating the whole country and the whole country dying. So I still believe that the State of the Nation address, to me, would have talked very well about our economy, would have talked very well about unemployment, would have talked about the health situation in Uganda or how we are going to improve our health, would have talked about agriculture in real sense, not Museveni going to Rwachitura and then calls all the ministers there to come and see. And the next time you are going to hear land evictions because the ministers will want to get land and duplicate Museveni's model, which I vehemently oppose. It's not good for our country. So I expected that. And then lastly, to exhaustively talk about human rights. and then corrupt. But corruption, I believe Museveni himself is corrupt. He cannot fight corruption. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Francis, for that. Speaking of the economy, as I come to you, Joseph, who's just joined us, by the way. Thank you indeed for joining us. Joseph, the economy, according to the president, is growing steadily. We are on track, yes, to become a middle-income country by 2025, according to the president. It has grown by 6.5% in the past year, and it is driven by the agriculture, tourism, and construction sectors. Now, if I could ask you, Joseph, is this true? Is this a reflection indeed of what our economy is looking like? Or is it just another address to, fulfill a function of the president?
Lynn, thank you very much for having me, and thank you very much for having me after a very long time.
Oh, yeah.
I must apologize that you have made several efforts over the last few months to get hold of me, but thanks to the burdens Mr. Museveni has imposed on me personally and my party, Congress, and under the people of Uganda, and thanks to my own commitment, part of it is voluntary, to totally campaign, organize, and stretch and sacrifice, not Kabamba style, in order to get rid of the Museveni mess. Most of the times you were not able to find me, and in fact today you found me on the road, and I can tell you all the trips that I make in the interest of the peoples of the Republic of Uganda. I want to say this, that though I stopped following Mr. Museveni's address a very long time ago. I think I told you this program and the other programs, Celine, in other conversations you and I have had, but you're a fantastic presenter. But it is the case that I feel that waiting for Mr. Museveni for a whole day is killing my personal economy and killing the hopes and aspirations of people who depend on me. And spending time listening to the man is as sickening as being in the kind of traumatic experience I had under his regime when he arrested me as a student, and so therefore adding my own personal trauma. However, as a responsible leader and also as an expected friend of yours, whom I know at one stage you would possibly seek to invite me so that we share, indeed I follow them. So whether or not I go through the headlines or something like that, I genuinely do. But of course, in any case anyway, as political leaders, it's our jobs and responsibility to make sure that we get the pulse of everything that is happening. That said, you realize therefore that I've got a relative advantage, that it's now possibly now about the 33rd year since I've been following Mr. Museveni closely. Mr. Museveni's speeches are as predictable as the message that Museveni has impacted on our country. To the extent that Ugandans have committed themselves to this seasonal pain of this thing called state of the nation, and to the extent that media houses, not yours especially, media houses in Uganda commit time and effort and a huge amount of resources to following and preparing citizens for this, is actually generally very unfortunate. But you as a diaspora forum, and you knowing that your job is to engage people like ourselves to persuade the majority of Ugandans that they need to wake up and that Museveni is taking them for a fight, it's extremely important that we have this conversation. Now, look, Lynn, one thing that I would do immediately in the event that I am president of this country, and in fact, that I am associated with any new post-Museveni administration, I would seek to possibly review urgently whether or not we necessarily need this annual charade, called State of the Nation. I think Ugandans need results on the ground rather than some pompous guy coming in the National Assembly. And remember, this occasion, huge amount of money is injected into it. Number two, I think element of some of these things that we buy from the West. The makers of the NRA Constitution, and it's an NRA Constitution anyway, sought in the 90s to fidget while trying to seek to legitimize Mr. Museveni by looking for what they could pick from Westminster democracy model and what they could pick from Washington, both of the spaces for which they are trying to equip Mr. Museveni with the capacity to rule Uganda for 40 years. And so State of the Nation is basically an American thing. It's not a British thing. In fact, I am on a few weeks trip outside Uganda to see how other people, including the Brits, are going to go through elections as a matter of formality. So it's not necessarily something that is that very important, even if the leaders were taking it seriously. So anyway, so just some historical context, this kind of history. The new constitution making guys committed themselves that a president of Uganda elected, of course, I know many of them would tell you that they didn't expect that president would be a Museveni today in 2024. You know, the president of Uganda would go to parliament, perhaps is directly elected, very democratically elected, go to the National Assembly, which is a very respected, independent organ of the state, you know, respectfully say Miss and Miss Madam Speaker and address the nation and tell them what it is and then move on. Those were the things. Museveni's State of the Nation address is like a space created for him to go and patronize Ugandans. So, what I was saying, one, maybe I'm going round a bit. This Right Honorable Deputy Speaker, Mr. Chairman of the NRA High Command, you, the man who was in Nyabushozi but went to the bush and tore apart, meaning those before you then, meaning this protocol nonsense. I think it's absolute waste of time, and I think most of my colleagues in the panel here will agree. You see how American presidents present themselves, you know, when they're serious, of course. You see how British and other nations, the prime ministers make speeches. You know, this protocol thing takes 5 minutes of critical time. So Mr. Museveni, you start, you know, when he just opens up, for the first 5 minutes, you know, my daughter would want to be going to bed because she's an artist and she really wants to do things very quickly. So waste of time. We are critiquing Mr. Museveni's speech as State of the Nation. So I would actually seek to do away with that. I would just come, say hello. I'm sorry I kept you guys waiting, which Mr. Museveni would normally do, to take a little bit of my cup of tea, and then go straight to the point that says, fellow citizens, I love you so much. Fellow citizens, thank you for the privilege of giving us the opportunity to be able to serve you in terms of governing ourselves. And from the time when we came in, maybe 2-3 years ago, we promised you in our manifesto in the last election that we would do this and that we would dismantle corruption. We have done. That would break up the health system that had been privatized by NRA and then restore hospitals and schools and infrastructure. And these are the ABC that we did. You go straight to the point. Now, you talk about Mr. Museveni economics. What economic reforms? Of course, granted, I have not looked at the recent figures. You know, what economic reforms? Lynn, this morning before my breakfast, I was navigating between sorting out my daughter, sorting out myself, sorting out my very kind niece who's hosting me at this material time, plus, you know, sorting out health facilities worth $100 basically to support a family member who's sick in the Republic of Uganda. And the sickness, you know what? Basically medical checkup, blood tests, a bit of headache the other day, and because this is the guy who's at 70, you want to check, make sure that, well, you know, he's okay, and so therefore you carry on through various tests. The routine things that I did last week in London, the routine things that you would normally do under a UPC administration in Nagongere, the routine things that you do as a matter of routine in Kanungu, going either to the local health facility or to go to Itojo Hospital. Now, if you can't do that, I think I found my other colleague, Richard, talking about the economics of both macro and microeconomics. The economics of figures under NRA really means absolutely nothing. Lynn, maybe I'm going around with this thing. I'm simply saying that if you talk economic growth in Uganda and you're not talking about a systematic rise in wages in terms of, you know, a rise in wages maybe for teachers, rise in terms of wages for health workers, rise in terms of rise in wages for our people in uniform, maybe men, particularly police officers, and perhaps a rise in producer prices for coffee, cotton, the basics of maize and things like that. You're talking nothing as far as economic growth is concerned. I sort of seek to disagree with my brother there that maybe the economic growth, you cannot necessarily measure it in terms of the number of cars. That is inclusive. But in Uganda's case, I think it's more about how much gold has been looted from Congo. And it is true. In terms of expansion of the economy, you might talk about, how much, new starts in terms of businesses have been initiated. But those starts in businesses, remember, most of it will basically be from corruption money that by the end of the year, if you look through the details, you'll find that actual money that has been taken off of the treasury. That said, I want to say again that I was shocked that Mr. Museveni's first 2-3 paragraphs about histories that has been repeating all along. I think this thing really needs younger Ugandans and people like yourselves, inclusive, to know that they're being taken for right. The fact that you can actually do a State of the Nation address and quickly go on to how NRA started, 40 years ago, how you pulled members from UPC, DP, and KY, and you cannot tell us what you did with those people. How you pulled those people from those political organizations because you claimed that those political organizations had erroneous foundations, and you cannot tell us what your foundations are today. How you pulled 3 components that you're trying to talk about: democracy, I think as my colleagues are talking about democracy, human rights, and governance, and then you talk Pan-Africanism, and you cannot show us, because in any case, Mr. Museveni's State of the Nation address would have told us that, if we have a broader a challenge within the region, he would have told us his view, his position, and his own government's contribution to stability of Congo, his government's own contribution to stability of Rwanda and all their relationship with Rwanda, his government's own contribution to the instability in Sudan, all of which regionally you're talking, he's got a direct hand to play. No, I think this has been another boring rant. I came to it as a, by the way, it's my commitment to be part of these conversations. Hence, I'm your guest. I want to tell you, your listeners and viewers at the beginning of this conversation, right at the beginning, that Mr. Museveni is taking Ugandans for a ride. We should basically wake up and seek to organize how to push him out on the basis of his own track record, and to push him out democratically, and seeking to push out a regime like Museveni is not treasonable. I am campaigning in Britain right now, trying to seek, and I can't wait to push out Rishi Sunak from Downing Street, and I'm doing so deliberately and democratically. And the guy is going to go off of July 4th. There's no reason why you cannot get rid of Mr. Museveni, who came by force 40 years ago.
Right. Thank you so much, Joseph, for that passion from and I want to welcome Albert. I see you're here with us. Thank you for joining us. We'll come to you. I want to ask Okot Ochen, in light of what Francis and of course Joseph have highlighted, and in light of what many reactions have been, that the president has, lost touch with his speeches. Is pretty much predictable. What do you make of where all this is headed? I mean, we still switch on our TV stations, we still our screens, we still switch on our channels to pay attention to the president. He is the president of the Republic of Uganda, yet after he speaks, we still say the same. He's making same noise, same stories, and we move on. What does that speak of us?
Thank you very much, Lynn, and other members on the panel. I must say that I've listened to Museveni's speeches in the past, and of late, I occasionally do follow, but unless I'm free, but otherwise, I find the speeches wanting in most cases. Yeah, I find a State of the Nation address by John Museveni was interesting indeed. I think he touched on a few fundamental issues, but my concern might be the way he repackage the meat on the bones. Otherwise it became boring, and as others were saying, it began to repeat the same rhetorics that he has been professing for years. A few things caught my attention. I'm not going to repeat what my other comrades like Joseph and Francis have already hinted on. They have kind of expounded so well their perspectives. I think I found General Museveni, about corruption, that one, was very interesting indeed, because we have very serious hyper level of corruption right now in the country. There's no doubt. It's a cancer that is steadily, degrading and consuming our nation to the fabric, and that must be tackled. Unfortunately, the same gentleman, General Museveni, who is trying to point out about corruption, is speaking like a guest or a visitor who is arrived from heaven or from Mars, or from somewhere else, who has not been in the country. He has been in the country. He's aware of all these hyper level of corruption tendencies and deals that are taking places in the country. And on most occasions, the individuals who are engaged and involved in these retrogressive, primitive actions are his allies most of the time, both within and outside the country. For example, if you look back, like in the UK, in London, people say like Idi Amin, was a very, corrupt or a dictator. I can tell you for free that Idi Amin kind of bought or kind of invested had almost like 17 properties in the UK, in London. But as we speak right now, only 2 are left. Maybe just the resident of the High Commissioner and the office, Ugandan embassy. The rest were either sold and nobody accounted for these transactions up to now. When he came to power in 1986, in the late 80s and early 90s, he began to engage in privatization of the public sectors. Nightingale and the cooperatives are all gone, and nobody knows where the money went. The Coffee Marketing Board and EDC. So the historical, even narratives about corruption that has not been expounded on or accounted about. If you talk of corruption, example, the dams that are there, we have his right-hand lady, Anita, the speaker, is there. She's been accused on multiple occasions for all progressive and primitive tendencies. But, from that State of Nation address, I see that he's trying to applaud her. He's trying to say she's on the right path, which I must say, she's not the only corrupt person in the government. There are so many. In fact, she's just being sacrificed. We have so many corrupt people there. For example, if you go back to some contracts, like example, the roads constructions in Uganda. There's one road in Uganda, if, for example, the northern bypass, we realized that the cost for the construction of the roads was inflated by almost 200%. And that time was chaired by Dongato, who kind of investigated as a chairperson of the committee. It's there in black and white. Nobody could even be held accountable. So this is the same gentleman who comes before Ugandans and says that, there's corruption and it wants to be addressed. Meanwhile, he has not done anything at all in the last almost 40 years. He must, guys like, General Muhezi, Muhezi, I think there was Kotesa, all these guys were once sanctioned in the 6th Parliament. But, he recycled them back in the system on many occasions. So he has no kind of moral mandate and, optics to speak about fighting corruption. He touched on also things like, like the interfering with the private sector, really touch on that, which I find that is wanting. He talked about the internal witnesses, like in 1971, Idi Amin chased away, Indians. Well, that's almost how many years ago? Almost 42, 45 years ago. You are bringing up the same line of narrative. It makes no sense. In fact, Idi Amin's government was less corrupt compared to the present regime. Okay, it talks about the 1970, the move to the left by UPC and Obote. Indeed, the Dakivu Declaration was a very good philosophy and concept, except that the enemies of Uganda interfered before it was implemented. It talks about trying to about the external borders and security. Well, to some degree, I would say Uganda, within the internal ending, we have a fairly secured, borders. I would say, there's fairly, compared to other countries or in the past, there's some kind of security around. But I must say also again, Uganda as a nation, we have a very messy track record. We have interfered with our neighbors a lot. And that goes against even the AU, rules and philosophies. If we have our hands tainted in the DRC, we have our hands in Rwanda, in the past, our soldiers, like General Kagame, they took our weapons and invaded, Rwanda, the rest is history. You go also in Burundi, we had some kind of also hands there. You go to Sudan, the same. Khartoum. You go to Southern Sudan, the same. You go to Somalia, you have a hand. So we don't have that credibility of building even the black race solidarity and and partnership. In fact, we have been trying to actually be a destructive ally to most of these countries here. So I think Museveni talked about so many things, and they've been about the same narrative since 1986. The same things, nothing new and nothing much. Though it touched on good things, but I think the way it kind of relays the messages gets distorted because of the historical aspects, how things have been done in the past. We have no moral mandate to talk about corruption, about respecting other external borders. We talk about the East African Cooperation. Is a good concept that was not just started under his leadership. That was during the days of Julius Nyerere, Mzee Kenyatta, Dr. Milton Obote. They were already functioning, except that when Idi Amin came to power in 1971, they collapsed. And again, the way it's also being done right now, it might not survive much if we don't improve about the concept. Otherwise, I don't see anything much, but he repeated the same things. And what caught my attention most was about the corruption. And I think the concept of administration that he kind of adopted of decentralizing the governments of Uganda has even exacerbated issues. He talked about sectarianism. He talked about maybe Uganda being more patriotic. I find that by decentralizing leadership of Uganda to the districts to some degree has promoted sectarian politics and nationals. If you look at the older generations of the 60s and 70s and early 80s, a person who would be born in Chigezi would go to school in Moroto. A person born in Yumbe would go and study in Hoima. The person becomes more kind of patriotic and nationalistic in looking at things. You could even finish your studies at Makerere. If you're from the east, you're going to work in Boshenyi, no issue. But right now, you finish your studies from Makerere, you run back to your home district. Or you go to you're born in Mbarara, you go to Mbarara High School and primary or an university, you study there and work there. How are you going to be a nationalist? So all these are things that were brought in by what Museveni's what philosophies, and they are wanting. So if it tries to undermine and degrade, the contributions of the past leaders, then I think we should review its legacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Okot, for that. I want to ask Miriam at this particular moment. Miriam, we have had several conversations on the different State of the Nation addresses over the years. And oftentimes it is the same response day in, day out. He is being serious, he has lost touch with the world and what's happening around him. I wonder if ever he has mentioned anything serious. But now, there are things that I want us, that we have tackled before, Miriam, that we ought to, that we always expect a president to address. And so one of them is the modern day slavery. In the Middle East, we export labor to the Middle East. And we know that over the years, things have continuously become bad in that regard. Mistreatment of by their employees of these people we sent to the Middle East. We have corruption. We have continuously talked about corruption, and he also mentioned it during the Martyrs' Day celebrations about the corruption. He said the same on 6th, and he talks about these things, but we don't seem to see any action on them. Land conflicts have continued. We are seeing the debt burden growing every other time. We are seeing the high crime rates. The police force has, been arresting criminals every other time, and it keeps growing instead of going down. It grows. So there's a question of transition. Sections of the public have continuously asked, who is going to address this? There's so much. So Miriam, I ask, honestly, if we are saying that the president is coming to address the nation, and we still have glaring issues that we ought to hear him address, instead of him just, hint on them and just go back and file the speech. What do we do for him to address these things?
Thank you, Lynn, and my fellow panelists. When you hear, ideally, Ochen has hinted that these State of Nation rituals and whatever are all coped, but I think we failed to copy completely. For instance, if you hear the State of Union address from a US president or UK prime minister, you're going to hear the economy breaking down. This year we created this many jobs. This year inflation has gone from A to B. The welfare of people is from A to Z. But our nation of address is like a Bible, like Seven, I think, has a favorite book, and he goes back and reads the old verse over and over. It's like a ritual to say the list, and he doesn't specifically talk about the details because maybe he knows there is nothing there to account for. So the State of Nation address would be an annual account and say, hey, you people, you gave me this much taxes, you gave me this much time. In the last 365 days, we've managed to achieve ABCD. This was our manifesto. We have this and this to fulfill. But when you look at the issues you have hinted at, the debt so far is astronomical, and it takes a big chunk, more than a quarter of our budget resources. And it's now we are borrowing to pay the debt, the previous debt, then we are borrowing on that to pay the interest, and we are chronically indebted to the extent that you don't even know how do we turn around this to really get back on track. And the biggest problem, the president hinted on it, like as usual, he massages the real issue, which is corruption, and then he goes around it without tackling it. He said that corruption is like treason, but then in the same breath, he said that people make mistakes. I mean, if you have a public officer who makes a mistake that ends up in the economy losing that much money, why don't you fire them? We have so many competent people who can do effective jobs and without making those criminal mistakes, and then you forgiving them. For me, the iron on corruption on that State of Nation address was the president and the speaker standing on the same podium. The speaker recently has been fired left and right for being the highest, the most corrupt speaker we have ever had. And then the president is there, both of them are there, like talking about corruption. I mean, who is preaching what and to who? The corrupt official is just there standing on next to you, and you are here after sanctions. A few months ago, she received even more sanctions from US on top of the previous one she had got from UK and UAE. The speaker is the president is praising the speaker for assisting her to achieve the goals that he had set to achieve politically in this term of government. So you wonder, what are those goals? Is corruption one of them? And then he goes ahead and condemns the activists who are condemning corruption, who are advocating against corruption, that they are pandering to the donors' demands and ABCD. But it's because, Mr. President, you are not doing your job. If the government in Uganda was fighting corruption, who would be talking about it? And then for us, like people in diaspora, and on this show, we've been talking about it. The so-called kadamas, the trek of unskilled labor from Uganda to the Middle East. The unemployment problem. If you are going there to talk about that the economy is growing and now we are middle income, but half of your population is unemployed, whether they are in the rural areas or in urban areas, all Ugandans, the few skilled labor. By the way, Ugandans are not like super educated. When you hear that the graduates can't find jobs, you think that we have high numbers of graduates. That was, I think we don't even have more than, the dropout rates, even at PLE, you see only 27% of people who enroll in UPE are the ones who graduate P7. So that means more than 60% of Ugandan population don't even have the primary level education, which is basic literacy. So when you see that Ugandans are not, the graduates are not getting jobs, whether it's those who finish A level or who drop out at a certain level but have the basic education. Here in USA, if you have a high school diploma, you are regarded as educated. That's the basic minimum, and you can be hired anywhere. But in Uganda, even with 2 degrees, you can't find an internship, a paid internship. And that's how highly unemployed, unemployment rate is in Uganda. Most of the people, I think only like 10% of those who graduate manage to get salaried jobs. And I heard yesterday someone was saying, even these factories, you see that they're creating jobs, maybe which are coming in here to process goods and do that. They don't even pay $100 a month to these people. So you find that you are there employed 30 days, you are paid less than $100. And then the cost of living is going high. And recently we had a research where people say if you go in a public hospital, you are likely to sell your land to pay the medical bill. Then when you go home, you do what? Because we know 80% of our population lives on land as for sustainability. They are peasants. They basically survive on where they get their living income and food. So if one member, if you have 7 people in the household, one member goes sick, and that's one time, not their lifetime. One time you are sick, and then they sell that land which was feeding 7 people plus, and even you, the patient, you need to go back home and survive. But the land ended up paying the medical bills. So all one person being sick, even in 1 year, is going to wipe out all your income, economic sustainability as a family, as a household. That's the state of economy in Uganda today. We are going to listen to the budget on 13th June, but I don't expect anything. So even the little steps we take at the macro level, which makes us, okay, go into the middle income, whatever they call it. So, and the GDP per capita is above 1,000. They assume that every Ugandan today at least has some income of $1,000 a month. But we see even less than 1 million Ugandans get even less than, I think, how many people, I've forgotten the numbers, and even 1 million Ugandan shillings. 1 million Ugandan shillings is less than $300. So that's how poor Ugandans are. That means the little money that the economy is getting, if at all the economy is growing and those figures are not cooked, it shows that money is wasted at the higher level. It doesn't go down to the ordinary person. It's like we are trying to fetch water in a basket with holes. However much it rains and we put our basket out there, the water will just throw away because our basket has the problem. So the economic trickle down is not there in the economy. And however much people get rich, as long as the president and the NRM government doesn't fight corruption, we are going nowhere as an economy, and the people cannot benefit. Actually, the funny thing, when you are watching that State of Nation address, even after Museveni had mentioned that, oh, we are joining the middle income, he expected cheers from his people, most of whom are NRM because opposition boycotted anyway. But people didn't even cheer that because they know the reality. Even those high-paying government, civil servants, and politicians who take the lion's share of our smaller resources also are faced by the economic hardships that are facing every other Ugandan. And unless you are the most tied, I don't even know if Museveni, a person who lives on government budget and is his household is sustained by taxpayers' money all his life as an adult. He has, I don't know if he remembers ever having to look around and say, how much money do I have on my account and where do I get my next medical bill? Because the government pays his bills, as he has been a president for 38 years. So in his life, he doesn't know how to hustle. He doesn't know the effect or the feeling of being at home and you have kids, they need school fees, you have medical bills for your mother, you have medical bills for your neighbor and the cousin and the extended family. You have to pay all that on a check, which is not even enough to fit in your wallet. And that's what the public officials, even the employed, then there are those who are unemployed, there are those who are self-employing, those employing themselves. Recently, we saw business people striking because taxes are so high. So we are incurring debts as a nation, but it's the common man who suffers. And, and even the business community is feeling it. All Ugandans are feeling that pressure, and that's the state of nation, if we are to say it that way, literally. The state of nation today is survival for the fittest. And then we've seen incidents of mental illness, people committing suicide in the middle of the city, jumping from the so-called skyscrapers. The few that we have in Kampala have now become cemeteries. And what did he say about it? We all know that more than 14 million, that's the Lancet report last year, which highlighted that more than 14 million out of 45 million Ugandans have medical issues, but they don't even have medical facilities and trained medical nurses to take care of them. I've lived in Uganda most of my life. I've never been in any hospital and I see a sign where it says it's for mental welfare. Like you see cardiac, heart department or whatever, gynecology or whatever. I've never been in any hospital and I see maybe if they've added it recently, and I see somewhere anybody who has mental issues can go for attention in any public referral hospital. Yeah, Lynn, that's the state of our nation. It is very sad and it's very worrying. I would be happy if Museveni today was giving his last state of nation address. Maybe we would have hope that someone would come and rectify the situation.
Wow. Sad as it is, unfortunately, we still have a long way to go. You mentioned very interesting issues there, but I want to bring Albert in. Albert is an experienced economist. The president did mention that our economy is growing steadily and there's great improvement. He's been preaching to us that he's handling and making sure that our inflation rate stays within acceptable norms. And well, we are trying. From the look of things, we are still much better than our brothers and sisters across the East African community. But I also want to bring to your attention, next week on 13th, there'll be reading of the budget. Now, the last financial year budget was about 52.737 billion. Now, as I speak, our budget is going to be 72.136 trillion. Where we are headed, I do not know. And from the look of the projections, Albert, if you could make comparisons really for us as an economy, we are not even anywhere in the top 20 economies of this world, of this Africa, of Africa particularly. And here we are saying we are growing, we're excited. I don't know. What do we make of all this?
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you, panelists. It's really a pleasure to join you guys today. I missed you last weekend, and here it was an exciting show. And this one is as well. I see you have new panelists, and I'm glad to meet you, Joseph. That was quite an interesting presentation. So let me start with the State of the Union, since the budget is coming in the future. I think we're short selling Museveni in this, because I think I had all, except for Kamuhanda, I've had the other panelists, and everyone is saying that this is the same. Yes, broadly it is the same, because usually Museveni's speeches, at least consequential speeches or important speeches, center around three things or three topics: preservation of the regime, and in there he mentioned corruption and loyalty, and because those are really the things that matter to him, and the preservation of the regime. And then there's always deflection of blame. The deflection of blame. So that's where the West comes in, and some misguided people that he thinks are being influenced by the West. So, and then the third one is attack on the opposition. So those are always present. You can go back to the State of the Union from the 90s or the early 2000s. You'll find those three themes in there. However, the characters, be it politicians and even circumstances, do change. So in that regard, the president does say something new, but always to the service of those three broader themes. So what were the new things in the preservation of regime? The regime, he knows, he shares it, has become, as somebody mentioned here, hyper corrupt. So those who had expectations of Museveni giving this rousing speech condemning corruption were clearly misguided. Okay, so he prized Annette among others, and even downplayed, as somebody has said here, Miriam said, he downplayed really the dangers of corruption. And yet we all know it is a cancer that eats at every institution, and even eats at the things that he actually says he wants to do. But he downplayed it. And then we went on the deflection of blame. It's always the West. There's never been a responsibility on the part of the president or his people. For as long as I know, and I've been a very good student of the president and his government, I have never seen or heard him apologize for anything that goes wrong in his administration. In my humble opinion, Museveni is the do no wrong president. Everything he does is right. It's just everyone else's fault. Where he has failed, it's everyone else's fault. I think Okot mentioned that he sometimes acts as if he has landed from planet Mars and then he has not been the president for all these years. When he says, oh, we will do this, we will deal with this. I'm like, you've had almost 40 years to deal with that. You didn't. So there you will find, again, some new things in what he said. And then the attack of the opposition. Clearly, the opposition characters have changed. It used to be the Besiges and the Samogereres and the past leaders. Now, of recent, it has been obviously Kyagulanyi. And he was prominent in that speech by name and sometimes by implication. So let's acknowledge those new nuances in Museveni's speech. The rest, yes, he will take you to the NRA rebellion. He will take you to the people who joined him, whom he will never acknowledge or credit contributions to. He will go through all that. We're used to that. But we do ourselves a disservice when we don't listen to the nuances and we don't pay attention to the new characters that recycle into his government and why they do recycle in and why the old characters leave. If we don't pay attention to that, then we're doing ourselves a disservice and we're doing the country a disservice. Why is Annette Among the darling of the president? Why is she being praised in a national address when the rest of the world is sanctioning her and the rest of the country is in uproar about her activities? That's a question for us to deal with and maybe a topic for another day, but we should explore that. Other than just saying, oh, Museveni didn't say anything new. Oh, he said plenty of new things in that address. And we're just missing them. And when we miss them, we'll find ourselves having the same conversation next year after another State of the Union speech that will probably maybe highlight another speaker. So let me go back to your question on the budget. Yes, the budget, they said, is going to be about 72 trillion Uganda shillings. It's a budget that the country cannot afford. But in the State of the Union, you heard the president praise the collaboration and how this budget came to be. It's also a budget that before the end of the fiscal year, will need a supplement or supplements, because that's the way his administration runs. In developed countries, and some of us who are budget officers, we know that a budget is a statement of values. So you go and find out, and when the budget comes out, we'll discuss it more. But you can look at the past ones. When these broad statements are made on how money is going to be spent and in what ministry and for what purpose, therein you will find the values of this president and this administration. So for my sister here, Miriam, who is complaining about health services, you will find that statement of value in the budget. How much money is the president dedicating to health services? You will know what he values for himself and for the country, because he is the leader of the country. So let's not deal more with the numbers. Those are not going to change. The budget will always be ballooning and will always never be able to afford it as Ugandans. So they will be borrowing at a higher cost. And now that we've become international pariahs, our cost of doing business in borrowing is going to be higher. So that's a given. But we should, as Ugandans, as people who love our country and want to see it progress, we should pay more attention on the statement of values that if the president reads or the minister will read when the budget is being read. What is this president valuing? And maybe if we answer those underlying questions, we'll reach to a point where we can actually form a coherent opposition. And by opposition, I don't mean a party. I mean strong voices opposition, whether inside and outside Uganda, that will finally dislodge this administration. Otherwise, we're looking at a president who will die in power and leave Uganda and Ugandans in chaos, fending for themselves. I'll stop there, Lynn. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much, Albert, for those interesting comments. I'm going to, if there's any reaction so far to what we have talked about, this is the time you raise your concern. But from what I read, all of you are saying that the president needs to change the way he addresses the nation. Needs to put in focus issues that affect the people, and not just issues that really are dear to him as him, but also issues that the people want him to address. And people are predicting what he would say and what he would not say, and all those things. So let me take your reactions now. Joseph, I think you are among. Okay, Joseph, please.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I think there's something going on with my camera. But look, I think we're all on the same on this. I just want to say that from Albert's perspective, I don't think any of us are suggesting that whatever Museveni is saying is new, and so therefore we are dismissing it completely. And I'm sure that's not what we meant. In fact, I am the one who said that I have stopped following him. The point was basically that I have stopped giving it the energy that possibly it would deserve. And in fact, possibly I'm cautioning Ugandans that we should move away possibly from getting obsessed with him, but doing the very important point that Albert made at the end, how we coherently come together in order to mobilize and organize for an alternative exit for Mr. Museveni. Now, of course, for that, I have a moral authority, because I could say that I've been fast on the scene. Mr. Museveni's first bogeyman was UPC and Obote way before Paul Semogera. And as I was saying again, that way back from early 90s, we were on this and we simply said, we told you guys so. In a way, nothing generally fundamentally has changed except for Museveni. So in other words, what changes, of course, the function of time. What changes function of strategy? Of course, in any case, at the moment, one of the bogies are the West. But in the 90s, the West were Mr. Museveni's makers. And some of us who bowed the streets of London, Washington, and others, particularly in cold winters, waking up, these Western interests that apparently at the time were very clearly in the interest of Mr. Museveni, but trying to seek their public opinion to compel their legislators and those men and women who govern on their behalf, at least for them, they govern on their behalf, to not entrench Mr. Museveni. It was very frustrating. Fast forward to today, though, what I realized is that much as we were, particularly UPC and others in the early stages of the 90s and 80s and 90s, were very much alone. Today, we are alone as Ugandans, meaning that the Semogeras and others and came and the Besigers and Chagulanjis came, and we are together. But the common frustrating thing is that while we were alone at the time, and whereas it was true that we were totally committed to seeking the change and exposing Mr. Museveni, both at home amongst Ugandans and globally, fast forward to today, there is this broad open spectrum that what Mr. Museveni is providing us and is providing us over the years are froth, and so therefore unreal, we need to change. What worries me though is that I'm not sure whether we are sufficiently together as organized Ugandans to seek an alternative. And that's why I came with a dismissive tone that, look, there is nothing that should interest any Ugandans about Mr. Museveni, because there's not going to be any possibility from Mr. Museveni or NRA, and I repeat to you fellow Ugandans, there is nothing, and I repeat, there's nothing going to be from Mr. Museveni or NRA that will seek to change your well-being. In any case, as I think one of my other colleagues also said, 40 years you've failed, 40 years you've spent actually entrenching yourselves. So for Ugandans, nothing will change under Mr. Museveni. The challenge for us, including in this panel, is what is it that we should do together to wake up the minds of those people who still think that their future is being guaranteed, their possibilities are being organized. They must have some hope in Museveni, or there must be some kind of miraculous Mr. Museveni who will wake up in the morning tomorrow and say, Bambi, for the Ugandans have mistreated you guys. There is a little bit of hope to you, for you, that I'm giving it to you. And those other Ugandans who, for some reason, in a very strange way, think that the Jesus, my Jesus of Nazareth, is going to wake up tomorrow and rescue Ugandans on behalf of Ugandans. No. The Jesus that I follow, and including the Muhammad and others that others follow, they will be there for us. But if I want to use Israel as meaning the Holy Land broadly, no, the Jews are fighting using heavy, extreme equipment, actually war of genocide to destroy Palestine. I'm to give my opinion on this, but they are seeking to claim their space, and yet they're the number one citizens of God. So if the Jews are doing this, I'm not saying that's what we should do. Some interesting Ugandan thinks that after we've come from Uganda Matters events down that corner of Kampala, Jesus is going to send us a rescue team. It won't happen. We need to mobilize, we need to organize, we need to wake up, and following Mr. Museveni's State of the Nation address, I think Ugandans need to be angry that they're being taken for granted, and that combine the conversations we are having today and roll it and turn it into, if you like, an energy that brings us more together, and particularly together in such a manner that in diversity are we able to find a way. I am talking politics and yet I'm not giving the answer. I don't know what that is, but I think out of it there must emerge a leadership in the Ugandan populace. It does not have necessarily to be from UPC or from any particular political party, but it's actually urgent that UPC provides that, and I hope we're able to provide that. But whoever provides that, we urgently need to provide, to emerge with a sense of leadership that brings us together and push Mr. Museveni towards the finishing line. That I hope that finishing line is the next year or two, to make sure that Mr. Museveni is sent retiring. Because if that doesn't happen, I don't know where this country is going to be in the next 10 years. And for me, who's surrounded by youngsters around me right now as I talk, I am rather concerned by the future. And somebody has talked about the diaspora. I have been receiving phone calls this morning from somebody, a daughter of a very, now unfortunately late, senior citizen of the Republic of Uganda, very well-established Ugandan citizen who passed away recently. His daughter is chasing me like nothing. She's looking for a few 100,000 Uganda shillings because she wants to go abroad. And you try to tell them that abroad there's no hope, whether it's in the Middle East and sometimes even in the West, in which most of us are, that hope is not there. And that the answer should really be us sorting out the Republic of Uganda, so that we make sure that whatever happens down there, our tax receipts are well spent, and so that when we also get jobs and our children get jobs, those jobs are well paid, and that the public services that is supposed to be public service are genuine public services, so that our children, including grandchildren who may be growing up in Europe and North America and elsewhere, should be able to retire or to go ahead and join Agongera in peace and in harmony, but in a manner in which the quality of living they have is the quality of living that Ochen was trying to talk about, that the UPC is trying to provide in the 60s, and that one which can be at par with any other average emerging economy, including perhaps in this case, South Korea.
Thank you so much, Joseph, for that Yes, indeed. We need to talk about these things. And instead of us just talking, we need to rally ourselves. This is the appropriate time for us to rally as a nation to really to effect the change that we want. Miriam, you want to say something?
Yes, I want to respond to Albert. Albert, it was a breath of fresh air to see someone commending Museveni. I had forgotten about that. Thank you for reminding us that he is doing something, but I don't see anything. That is not to say that in the last 38 years he hasn't done much, but this year, what has he done this year? What has he done last year? What has he done in this term of his government? Every year we give him a budget, and that budget should come with accountability at the end of the financial year, which is now. So what has he done? You said we're not sure that he's gonna put money in the health sector, but if he had highlighted it as a priority, he would have said so. And well, anyway, let's wait for next week and see how much he's gonna put in the health sector. But I'm not expecting anything since he didn't even say anything about it. So back to Joseph. Yeah, thanks for talking about transition. That's an we we were all lamenting and nobody's looking at the way forward. But when you talk about transition, I also look back in the last few days, the existing political parties so far in Uganda as they try to mobilize. Seven again is really blocking them, and NUP cannot move, and the other people he's using the security forces to block opposition from mobilizing as usual. So we don't expect so much unless you also want to go to the bush, which is really a dark corner. I hope you don't. It never happens to Ugandans. But what is the way forward? So if Museveni was planning but all it is in his mind about transition. This would be the State of Nation address since we have elections next year. Would be his last State of Nation address, and it would be so remarkable that he would be talking. We have come this far. This was our manifesto. We have achieved A, B, C, D. So here we are today. Even if I'm not voted back, the next leader can start from here because he's 5 years. This is the end of the term of office, which he assumed in 2021. But he mentioned nothing to that effect. We have general elections next year. Nobody's talking about it. So what do we expect? That means it's not a priority as far as he's concerned. Even he is concerned about his continued stay in power as a person, as a leader, but not even as a party, not even as a Ugandan. He's not at all bothered about transition and any political processes that are coming next year, which means deep in his mind, he knows nothing is going to happen. So people say, okay, today let's get real. Museveni is 80 years old. Yes, he's no longer as physically as active as he used to be, and mentally and every other else. We know how 80-year-olds function, even if he's superhuman. At least there are those weaknesses that come with age which have already crept in. But what plans are there for any transition, just in case anything happens? Today I was baffled. I think it happened yesterday. His son is asking the Speaker of Parliament to represent him as what? A function. A few years ago, we saw, a few days ago, I mean months ago, the First Lady was asking the Vice President to represent her to a function. This is a minister, a cabinet minister, ordering the VP, the next biggest power leader in Uganda as far as protocol is concerned, to represent her. So she's like a subordinate. So which means today the Museveni's family thinks they are the leaders of Uganda, like they are the number one, and everybody else is subordinate to them. That's the state of our nation. So for me, when I think about the state of nation, what is the state of nation of Uganda today, politically, economically, and everything else? We have climate change issues, and we are too busy to think about that, though it's creeping on us. Floods are everywhere. Lynn was talking about too much sunshine in Kampala, and we know that the climate has been changing. There were fatal floods in East Africa recently. So many Kenyans died, and so many people lost their property, and lives were hurt and are displaced in that. Suppose that comes to Uganda in the next rainy season. Are we prepared to counter that? What are we doing to really to counter the global warming that is invading us day by day and is getting more worse and worse? In the past, we used to think that Africa is still intact and it won't be affected by the global warming changes, but that was fantasy. But our leaders are yet to internalize that. We are yet to have that as a priority and put it across. Either we give free people trees to go and preserve our wetlands, or we do something about it. We wait for donors, whatever donors put in, and then that's what we write on and think that's our policy. But what is our policy to counter the global warming as a country? So when we are looking at the state of nation, looking at the economic situation, we have massive unemployment and poverty that the people are facing. And the question is, what is the way forward? Today, if you ask anybody in Kampala, if you are not a foreign entity, a foreign business investor, you can hardly survive in Kampala as a young small business investor, or even if it's big business. If you don't get those government incentives of tax waivers and all that, you can hardly survive in the Uganda economy. The business environment is so harsh, and that means if you can't, if the businesses and investments cannot survive in that economy, there are very few chances of creating jobs for so many young people. Our population is multiplying, and I look forward to this census. Recently we had the census process going on. For us in diaspora, we were never counted. That's also an issue. But that census process should give us a picture of where we stand today. What is the economic situation? What is the population growth, and how the welfare of the people? The school dropouts, the status of education. So far, the trend is good. Yeah, the diversifying of our curriculum and trying to put skills in that process, so that even if kids drop out at a certain level, they have basic skills which can enable them to go out and look for sustenance as far as creating their own jobs or working somewhere else is concerned. But we need to assess that. How far have we come, and how much is there to do, and how are we going to do it? For me, what I see, we have a management. If Uganda was a going concern as a business, we have a management, we have a CEO who no longer have any initiative, who no longer has any innovative ideas to push the company forward. The company is, the Uganda company is almost going bankrupt. We are over borrowing and we can't pay back the loans. We are producing almost nothing. Not to mention that these people who are leaving the country, including the unskilled labor we are exporting into the Middle East, and us in diaspora, the remittances today are the second largest exchange earner for the economy. So we are selling people, that's what we have, which wouldn't be bad as long as we are selling skilled labor and then putting the earnings to better use as investment in the economy, so that even if our generation is going out to look for money abroad, our next generation should be able to survive within the economy of Uganda. So if you are a future young, if you are a young Ugandan today, what do you look forward to? What is there to inspire you to dream big? What can you do? If you ask any Ugandan kid, what do they aspire to do in the economy of Uganda? How does the economy look like? In the past, our parents used to tell us, get education, it will give you everything you want. Today, I'm at loss of words of what to tell my kid, my young nephews and whatever. If you tell them education, but then you look at a person who graduated 6 years ago, they have 2 degrees, they can't get any job. And then you are telling a kid, go do work on your education. Education is a key to your future. What type of future is that? Is it a wrong key? Do we need another key? Or it's the future which needs to be unlocked? So thank you, Joseph, for talking about transition. I think all of us, we need to look forward how can we get out of this mess?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Miriam. Albert, I see your hand up, but quickly, Francis says in the chat room, just a minute, Francis says Museveni is going to leave Uganda in a state of anarchy. Then he found it. Albert, you have your hand up, please.
Yeah, I was going to react to Miriam's sarcastic statement that I thanked Museveni. But in a way, we're all saying the same thing, and I agree with both Joseph and Miriam. So Miriam is saying that this man is taking the country in the wrong direction. So if I just took that last statement alone, it is an acknowledgement that he actually is doing something. Now, whether that something is good or bad is debatable. It's a different question. And that's what the point I was trying to make. And again, to Joseph's point of saying, yes, we don't spend the energy on there. And I'm still appealing to us, especially us who are concerned and we're here, we're spending our morning hours and afternoon your time, Lynn, having these conversations. And these are important conversations. Even if 2, 3, or 4 people listen and hear what we're saying, it's enough. These are important conversations. But I am saying to Joseph, do spend the time. Because, believe it or not, he is saying something. We may agree with it, disagree with it, but he is saying something because, again, the characters and circumstances in these speeches change. So we need to pay attention to why this time he's praising Lynn. And last year, he was praising so-and-so. So that's it. That is telling. So I did not say that he's doing good or he's doing things good, that are good for the country, but he's doing something. You have to acknowledge that. If some of us who are fans of movies, even when you see like these big time heists of bank heists, you will see the meticulous ways how these thieves sit on tables and draw maps of the bank and who will do what. It's planning. So if you kind of throw that out and say, oh, those are just petty thieves, and yet they've just stolen a vault full of $1 million, then you are the one missing the bigger picture. Because these people are planning. So they are doing something. And we have to acknowledge that. It's just that we need to tune in to what they're doing. So, for example, let me give you just a live example. Somebody talked about us organizing, especially people in the diaspora. Well, I live here in the diaspora, and I see their acts. I see their planning. I've turned up in some hotel unexpectedly and found a group of Ugandans. Some have flown in from Uganda, others have flown in from different corners of, and it was like, oh my God. And then when he was looking at me, what are you doing here, Albert? I was like, well, this is a hotel. It's a public property. I just came for another function, and you guys are here meeting. I didn't know there was a Ugandan function here. And there was none. But these are planning meetings sponsored by the government. People fly in and are meeting underneath our noses, and we're saying, oh, we're here in the diaspora. They're organizing. We're not. So if we say, oh, Museveni is not doing anything, we're wrong. He is doing something. Whether it's good for the country or not, that's a different question. Thank you, Lynn.
Yes, thank you, Albert. Okot, you have your hand up.
Thank you very much. I just want to comment briefly. I want to thank everybody. Albert, I thank you for bringing the other side of the coin, of the conversation. Very good. I think I do concur with your side of the coin that, the guy is doing something. It might be wrong or right, depends on how we look at it, but he's doing something. And if you talk about transition, I have told many Ugandans before that General Museveni and his cronies are not sleeping. Albert is saying that, he rumped into them, they're having meetings. Yeah, indeed, they're not sleeping. They're working day and night. And when guys were here celebrating that MK was appointed to be Army commander, was a way to curtail him from, being ambitious. I told people, no, this is part of the transition game, going on. By the fact that he has been placed in that position, he has now a free field to identify his allies and place them in very strategic, positions for the future. So they are planning for transition. No, it's okay. How about those who have the alternative voices? What are they doing? Are they galvanizing themselves into a force to reckon with the status quo? I'm not sure. I see that those with alternative voices to the status quo are actually scattered, which worries me. So Ugandans who are yearning for change, they must somehow come together. They must somehow bury their differences for the sake of the country. So Albert has a point there. I think if we need change, then we must be more proactive and also try to, usher in some sense of solidarity and togetherness. Thank you.
Thank you, Okot. Albert, is that your hand up again? I suppose not. Francis.
No, you can put it down. Let me put it down. No,
right.
I'm done.
Francis, we need to hear from you, your reactions so far.
Thank you, Lynn, and it's always exciting being with such a wonderful panel. But like any other person has said, I would say when we are saying that the budget is soon coming on the 13th, believe me that this budget will be about State House, how much they need again to continue stealing, and then about the henchmen, their portion they have already allocated, and there will be those we will give money to investors, said, and then that is money that they take. But believe me, Lynn, according to how our economy is heading, I believe that Uganda Revenue Authority will not be able to raise 30% that they have always contributed towards the national budget. And we are heading into a more catastrophic situation. But like as I have said, and Okot was saying, in terms of no, still his men and change, because then the little that will be there will be used to continue financing their luxurious lifestyle. And that's why for them, they don't see any problem in the economy. They view it at their level, provided a fleet of cars, they know how it is the fuel, once the car is full tank, and he has to move that experience potholes. That's why in the national address, you find they can't talk about infrastructure. Like, for example, is that a priority for Uganda? The social reforms, the economic plan, we didn't know all this and so on. It is of what, but apart from picking those which do not apply. Then when we come to legislature, which has also gone down, you have seen the quality of legislation at parliamentary level. And then that also shows us how much, I think it is what who talked about how much is divided, that there is no unity. Any leader should be seeing that the country is more or less like divided. How do I bring it back together? That to me, that is key as a leader, say, okay, how do I bring again the country together? Because that's how we can progress. If you talk about regional integration, you have not integrated the country. So what are you selling to the region in terms of integration? So we have to go to a regional integrational consortium as a people, as a. But if we are so divided, we would be smartly addressed. I have always said, going nowhere, and we would have nothing to offer to the East African community, nothing to offer to the African Union, and nothing to offer or contribute to the global economy, or if we need to assume our position. And having said that, then I look at the national crisis. For sure, Uganda is under the national crisis. Like as I said, sanctions have an implication. Museveni may not see them now, and the Anita and the rest of all, but they will soon see how those sanctions bite, and so on. And the situation has collapsed. That is the crisis. How do we get it? I do agree with the rest of the panelists that if we change leadership, for me, I don't look even at Museveni only, but of course, once you do away with Museveni, even the rest. Because if you look at all what we are talking about, failure in service delivery and so on, all these offices are occupied by human beings. But then, are they human beings who are looking at serving the country? But then it all zeroes about one person who sometimes puts those people in those offices and entrusts them with the public officers who do not measure to what a public office should be, or who adopt his style of let me feed myself, the rest, I don't know what will happen. They shall also feed themselves. Because how Museveni has always said, he's not a servant of anybody. He's working for himself, his children and grandchildren. So not until we begin doing a mass campaign to all Ugandans and show them that we are treading a dangerous path, then we are risky. And of course, I have always said unemployment is something that is important for us to tackle. Meaningful employment, not like as how we said, Lynn, that you just bring few industries, foreign industries, and then they are paying people peanuts. Your own police, like the policemen who are earning currently they may be earning 500,000 a month. I don't know, but the cost of living in Kampala, that means technically if you divide every month, a person is supposed to eat 20,000, right? Which means in a month a person is supposed to eat to feed the family using paying them 500,000. Where do they get them? How do they cater for them? How do they get them to school? The bottom line, an opening for corruption maybe in police and any other government. And then the payments from family level up to state house. All those are criminals. For them everywhere. In the state house, you come to the family level crime. So all these are, Lynn, I think I needed to hear all those the president talk about them than giving lectures as if he's talking to people who are and then talking of satellites, you being superpowers on the 3D, on water, in air, in space, and on land. And then was talking about a satellite. I'm like, recently, by the way, Museveni has a problem. Recently, he said they had put a satellite in space and it will bring about, I don't know, monitoring climate, I don't know which kind of information. Now again, you should know, if in the budget it happens, then you know there is again a clique that is again going to rob Uganda in the name of a satellite. Because for me right now, I understand it is a good thing to think of satellites and so on. But now if you can't even sharpen a toothpick, and now you are thinking of a satellite, That is fantasy of the highest order and taking Ugandans for a ride. And indeed, we have to look for a way of how to deal with Museveni and begin things that are more practical. And Lynn, that's why you find for us in the diaspora, even when you would think of going to invest back home, and Albert has always said that, what should force a person to go and invest back home? Otherwise, the knowledge, the where people can pull resources, they have it, but are the conditions, can they enable back home? Can they listen to us at the diaspora? Are we on the table? And the only way to reach the table, it is to put ourselves there. Nobody is going to put us there with the type of leadership of Museveni, which does not provide an even playground. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Francis. Just to inform you, Francis, we can sharpen toothpicks here in Uganda. We are making some toothpicks here in our bamboo, and I should take you around to one of those institutes called Uganda.
Congratulations.
Yes, we are packaging and selling toothpicks. There's another conversation for another day. But thank you so much. As we come to the end of this conversation, let me see what's in the chat room. Okot is saying, Francis, you're spot on. Uganda state is corrupt to the bone marrow. And he goes on to say, indeed, he says, indeed, beg your pardon, it keeps moving up in the belt. Okay, let's see. Uganda is in a state of fantasy from all fronts. Okay, there's a bigger message I wanted to read that he said. But if there's any other reaction as I organize this message, please, this is the time as we come to a conclusion of this conversation. As we wait for the budget reading, we all know that not much is going to change. Unfortunately, that is the mindset we have. But then we ought to do something about it, and we have started. So I'll run through each one of you, give a minute in your conclusive remarks. Joseph, I start with you.
No, thanks for having me once again. I hope that in the not so distant future, I will have another opportunity when I will start with you from the beginning to the end. But that I hope by then we shall have gone through the Museveni new stealing spree in the name of the budget, perhaps, and that we're able to tell ourselves quite clearly how much we are voluntarily giving to him. As I said, there was a conversation around taxation recently, and I was delighted that this is a subject that hit up to and including the people of Chikubu. I can tell you that we pay these taxes all the time, and this morning I have paid 400,000 Uganda shillings taxation in tax, by making sure that I paid medical bills that should really be coming from the tax receipts from the monies that you pay. Only yesterday, I told an average Ugandan who earns 900,000 Uganda shillings and possibly ends up with 600 as net pay. And I told them that the 300,000 Uganda shillings would have been granted partly to NSSF, but nearly 200 as a tax. Now, today, if I walked into the streets of Kampala and I pinched into somebody's pocket and put 10,000 Uganda shillings, I think the mob would deal with me there. Why the mob cannot deal with the tax thieves at the National Assembly, I do not know. Why the mobs cannot deal with the thieves at State House, I do not know. Why the mobs cannot deal with the thieves who steal our batteries from the most vulnerable in Karamoja, I do not know. The answer lies really in all of us coming together and simply saying that no, enough is enough. We've been taken for granted. The UPCs told you guys 40 years ago, 30 years ago. The Ochenos told you 30 years ago. The Ochenos are back, but thanks to the reality of time, all of us are here together. What is it that we can look at ourselves together and spot on, and Ochieno takes responsibility for some of his own shortcomings, but the reality is that Ochieno and Lynn, together with Miriam and Alfred and Ochen, that together this republic belongs to all of us, and that the sooner we quickly came together and sought a way forward, a possible 7 years way forward, the better for us. Because if we don't do that, the next budget, post this budget, would possibly be 100 trillion Uganda shillings, completely unsustainable. And unfortunately, not only is it unsustainable, we will not know where most of this money is going to. that money is going to equipping Museveni and his, if you like, through the economics of the bush, where it's about stealing rather than possibly even picking money to enjoy for themselves and grandchildren. Because the amount of money these guys have stolen in the last 40 years, as Betty Camille possibly would do way back 20 years ago, is extraordinarily unexplainable on how these guys are going to be able to use this money for themselves and their families. It is just ordinary that in 2024 we are having this kind of conversation while Ugandans are stably waiting and continue to club and almost officially steal from them and officially enslave them and their future. I think my message is wake up, Ugandans.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Joseph Okot, in a minute.
Thank you very much to everybody and other fellow compatriots out there. I think I do concur with lots of the perspectives just submitted by Joseph and others. I think it's a high time as Ugandans, I repeat that we come together and confront, the bull by the horns, so that, we address the quagmires that are, trying to bedevil our beloved country. And my appeal to Ugandans with alternative voices, also I urge all Ugandans out there to try and bury their differences and galvanize themselves so that, we have a common front, to institute change in this country. And finally, I hope, the people of Uganda will tackle the cancerous issues of corruption, and if possible, even take to the street and maybe take away the properties of those who are trying to, to steal from the poor. Because if there are no drugs in hospitals, then why should a person be owning mansions? Ugandans should become more proactive. That's my request. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Okot. And just before you leave our chat in the chat room, you said, indeed, I indicated before that the regional integration will not hold or flourish under Museveni. The concept of the East African integration is not a new one, except that current breed of East African leaders have compromised its growth and integration. Thank you. I come to you, Albert Bakassara, conclusively, in 1 minute.
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you, fellow panelists. This is always a great show. And again, as I said earlier, these conversations need to be had. And the only thing I can add on to everything that we've said is maybe let's be a little bit deliberate, the same way the president and his people are. And they join Okot in saying, let's not just be passive. Let's take active, because we're not, yes, we don't have a political party that combines all of us, but we are alternative voices. We don't have variable movement. We're not fighting the government. We're just, maybe let's make a concerted effort to appeal to our friends first, our family members, and we start there. Challenge them to see things in the interest of the country. Because right now, it looks like there's this new culture that has set in Uganda of everyone is grabbing whatever they can and not even thinking about tomorrow. And that's the culture that I would not even fear saying this, that was introduced in Uganda by this administration. That's not our culture. That's not our culture. We've never really been at this height of thieving whereby we don't even think twice or think about tomorrow. You just said we make toothpicks. I'm glad to hear that. But where we're getting the woods? By disseminating the forest. So it's not even thinking about tomorrow. Someone says, oh, there's an investor, Chinese, who's going to do toothpicks. And then they say, oh yeah, here's the license. No, and oh, here's your cut on the side. And no one even thinks and said, oh my God, this thing is going to disseminate our trees. And it is, because if you look at the Kilembe right now, the hospital was recently washed away because all the trees that the King of Toro had planted long ago were cut down on those on that mountain range. Now water is just flowing freely down and disseminating communities downstream. So yeah, we're making trees again. Museveni is doing something. I mean, we're making toothpicks, but is that really a good thing? So I'll stop there. But again, I thank you. I thank you, panelists. This is an insightful conversation, and we should always have these conversations. Of course, I can say that I'm in the comfort of and protection of the US. They commend people like Lynn who are actually on the ground and they do risk their lives because it's not easy. People have been punished for this conversation, so it's not a secret. Yeah, so I commend you, and really, yeah, you have more of a stake than we do. Some of us voted with our feet, and we still have that pain on our hearts, but it can't be any greater than what you're feeling, especially when you're living with these consequences and circumstances on the ground. Thank you, Lynn, and thank you, fellow panelists.
Thank you, Albert. And Okot is saying absolutely right, Albert. These bad manners are not our cultures and traditions. Francis, you're up next in 1 minute.
Thank you, Lynn, and the other fellow panelists for this healthy conversation. And I would say that if for the first time I saw the hypochondriac Museveni without a mask and asking other people who are close to him, putting on a mask when he's addressing Ugandans. That means it's true, COVID maybe has gone, it's no longer in Uganda. But most important, what Museveni is doing is hoodwinking Ugandans, and therefore it is on us to ensure that we educate the masses as much as we can, mobilize them, for them to realize that Museveni is playing on our minds and he has a long-term game which is leading Uganda into a dangerous path, and then we see how we always strategically debate and bring more and more people on board to ensure that our country does not go to waste. And then let's keep this conversation healthy and monitoring all his activities. I know, like as Sarah has said, we can't raise into an uprising to grab power through violence, like how he did, because it's not sustainable and healthy for a country. But I do agree with Joseph that if we mobilize and the masses understand what their power is, then democratically we can see Museveni and his regime come to an end, and we have a transition, then bring back the constitutional rule in Uganda. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
Lynn, can I say something just for a second, Lynn?
Yes.
Just like to say that to Albert, I'm delighted you're saying that and acknowledging that's actually very difficult to be on the ground. I'm actually official on the ground. The last 4 years, I left everything to go on the ground and to join everyone else there. It was delighting to see Miriam join us momentarily and briefly a few months ago. I am fully in there. I would like to be able to hear from all of you guys. Please, you guys inbox me. But we need to actually encourage many more of our colleagues in the diaspora to make sure that we're both at home and abroad, but particularly at home, because you guys in the diaspora bring a huge amount of new perspective, bring a huge amount of courage. And Lynn will agree with me that there are nuances, some of which are actually misconceptions about the diaspora that were deliberately placed into by this regime. But part of this is actually a genuine fear factor. A fear factor in our population that requires people like ourselves to be on the ground and simply tell people that no, this republic belongs to you more than it belongs to anybody else. And in many cases, possibly belongs to you slightly more than it might belong to somebody like Mr. Museveni. And I'm saying that without prejudice. I'm simply emphasizing that you guys are citizens of this republic, of this country, whatever it is or wherever we are, our great-grandchildren, even those ones who it's time to be going and thinking of a Republic of Uganda, but a Republic of Uganda which is functional and viable. Let me say this. I was nearly close to tears only last week meeting a fellow African from the Caribbean whose grandparents, ancestors were pushed out of the continent by force into the Caribbean, and whose parents were compelled to come into this mainland Britain. Right now, he, just a few decades ago, moved out of London because he thought it was too hostile, living somewhere in a very, very posh, exclusive, but guess what? The guy still feels that his children are completely unwelcome in this country. I sort of held back my tears because I knew that I would be leaving for the Republic of Uganda in a few weeks, but this guy has got nowhere to go. So, fellow citizens, let's just think about it from that perspective. We can't let the Republic of Uganda go into the dogs and go through the dogs and go into the hands of the dogs and be taken by the dogs while we're watching.
Absolutely. Thank you, Joseph. And conclusively, we end with Miriam. Miriam, in a minute, let's wind up on this conclusion.
Yeah, it's been great and enlightening conversation. I thank you all, the panelists and Lynn, for guiding us so far. In conclusion, I would like to say that it's actually when you travel outside Uganda, for us who are away from Uganda, that you realize it's a blessing to call Uganda home. But what is happening is that our home is at risk of being ruined by incompetent leaders who are greedy and don't even care about the future. It's incumbent upon all of us to really care about restoring our home into order. We have to make it a country which works for all of us, not for a few individual people who are in power, but all of us and our future generations. So as we go this year and 2024, 2025, 26 is coming into elections. Next year will be like election year, and we know how bad that happened. What it really means in Uganda sometimes. It's not comfortable, like Ochieno said, and Albert. But we all need to really leave our comfort zones and sacrifice a little bit to make Uganda work for all of us. Museveni is making a Uganda which works for him and his family. Who is going to create a Uganda that works for us, Ugandans? So we really need to, reflect on that. And when NRM was coming in 1986, they said, oh, we have to create fundamental change and all that. So let's go back to the basics. What have we done so far? What have they achieved? And what have they failed to achieve? And how do we move forward going on? What is the future we would like to see going forward? Museveni talked about regional integration, but today if you look around East Africa, the old East African community, I don't want to compare ourselves with South Sudan or DRC, which have been in civil wars for years, but Tanzania and Kenya and then Rwanda, the old EAC members, if you look around economically, we are the ones lagging behind. Ugandans used to be proud because we normally would be shooting ahead of others economically and politically, but today we are embarrassed to call ourselves Ugandans. And we have to do something about it. That's food for thought as I conclude.
Thank you so much. I like that all of you are saying we ought to do something. We need to do something as Ugandans and not just sit and fold our hands. I thank you all for making time. Thank you, Albert. Thank you, Okot. Thank you, Miriam, Joseph, and of course, Francis, who's just gone off. I thank you all for joining us. Those of you who are watching us on Civic Space TV, we appreciate you, and we hope that our conversations really tickle your minds to do something about your country. We'll catch you again next time, and we wish you the very best.
Thank you, Lynn. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Good, guys.
Bye, everyone. Take care. Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Nice weekend.
Yeah.